National College of Pharmacy, strategically located in the educational hub of Calicut with IIM, NIT, Institute of Spice Research, Calicut Medical College, and Calicut University. Our college has earned its name as leading pharmacy college in Kerala with its excellent facilities and dedicated faculties. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the online webinar on Health Technology Assessment in India, Gaps, Needs, and Challenges. Sponsored by International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcomes Research, ISPOR, organized by the student chapter, ISPOR, National College of Pharmacy. My name is Fatima Mujib, President of the ISPOR student chapter, and I will be hosting the program today. International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcomes Research, ISPOR, is an international multi-stakeholder non-profit organization dedicated to advancing health economics and outcomes research, excellence to improve decision-making for health globally. In September 2019, National College of Pharmacy established an institutional student chapter, ISPOR, to promote HEO work at a local level. A typical student chapter is governed by a president-elect or vice president, member secretary, treasurer, and a faculty advisor. In March 2020, ISPOR National College of Pharmacy student chapter was awarded the chapter activity grant of US $400 by ISPOR to conduct an educational symposium on health technology assessment in India, gaps, needs, and challenges. The ISPOR chapter activity grant is based on reimbursement of receipts. Although the symposium was scheduled to be conducted on 24th April 2020, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the symposium was subjected to an indefinite delay. We are now organizing the same symposium on an online platform. Health Technology Assessment, or HTA, remains a relatively new concept in Indian healthcare. Limited insurance coverage and poor healthcare funding make HTA very critical for India. Kerala state, with the best healthcare indices in India, has no system for HTA. The objectives of the webinar today include: first, to introduce how HTA improves healthcare decision-making. Second, to emphasize on how the paucity of research in HTA is distorting India's mere healthcare budget. And third, to increase the awareness about present-day challenges in pharmacoeconomics and global health. To further the understanding of various barriers in achieving universal health coverage, and to highlight the role of pharmacists in contributing to HTA. So yes, moving on to the core of webinar, let me welcome our beloved principal, Dr. M.K. Unnikrishnan, to give a brief about introducing HTA in pharma, a word of caution. Professor Dr. M.K. Unnikrishnan completed B.Pharm from BITS Pilani in 1978 and PhD from Mangalore University in 1997. He currently teaches pharmacotherapeutics, pharmacology, and drug discovery. MKU's major area of interest are drug discovery, evolution, cognition, public health, and education. He presently holds 4 patents in his name. His most recent work in collaboration with Boston University, USA, and University of Queensland, Brisbane, Australia. He is a member of the Society of Evolutionary Medicine and Public Health, USA, and publishes in his nascent disciplines. He is also an editorial board member of Scientific Reports, a Nature Group publication. MKU's articles published in the Economic and Political Weekly, Health Policy and Planning, etc., discuss various contemporary socio-political problems in Indian healthcare. He also contributes general articles in newspapers and magazines discussing healthcare issues and socio-political relevance. After 33 years of teaching experience in Manipal College of Pharmaceutical Science, he is presently Professor of Pharmacology and Principal at National College of Pharmacy, Kozhikode, Kerala. So, sir, please.
Thank you, Fatima. I think it's muted.
Yeah, thank you. Can you all hear me? Yeah. So, thank you very much for attending the symposium, and we look forward to having an interactive session at the end. Thank you very much for attending, and issues that we need to understand before we evaluate the program as such. HTA, as you know, is an evidence-based multidisciplinary policy analysis that compares the properties and effects of new or existing health technology with a current standard. And it's a scientific method with a systematic, transparent, unbiased method. And experts from many fields have to come together to achieve this. Physicians, economists, pharmacoeconomics, economists, epidemiologists, health managers, biostatisticians, engineers, regulators, government leaders work together and advise on adopting health technology. By health technology, what I mean is any intervention in health is a health technology. It can be a drug, it can be a device, it can be a surgical procedure, it can be a diagnostic kit, it can be a test, it can be anything which helps the patient to recover or detect or promote cure. It can be a vaccine, it can be anything. But the meager resources that we have at the government's disposal makes it necessary to choose wisely so that the best value for money is delivered in such a system. Now, according to International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcome Research, that is ISPOR, the body that's sponsoring our research today, our program today, HTA is defined as a form of policy research that examines short and long-term consequences of the application of healthcare technology. The properties assessed include the safety, the efficacy, the patient-reported outcomes, the real-world effectiveness, cost effectiveness, social, legal, ethical, and political impact. So it's very, very vast and extremely varied. So it requires the confluence of many talents. And this is where I think the challenge lies, because many different types of inputs need to come together. Now, why HTA? What's the reason for HTA? It's to inform technology-related policy making in healthcare and improve the uptake of cost-effective new technologies. See, we have to evaluate the each new coming technology and see which is best, which is most. In fact, you'll be having a very. Is there somebody unmuted? Can you please mute that mic, please? Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that it's important to check and qualify each intervention before it's adapted into a national policy. Now, just take, for example, the remdesivir. The remdesivir, now WHO has said, no, remdesivir is not enough. It doesn't help. So how do they achieve that kind of decision making? It's because many people have come together to make that decision. Actually, remdesivir has already been approved in 50 countries. The manufacturer is going in was going on in a hectic way until recently. And now the decision has come, no, it's not good enough. It's a very recent thing. So it's to improve the uptake of cost-effective technologies and prevent the uptake of doubtful technologies, something that is not very confirmed to be useful at that cost. So critical for developing and emerging countries because we don't have enough money. So we have to choose wisely. Highlights the contribution to inform policy and decision-making people and describes strategic actions. It also supports informed decision-making. And there's a remit for all these. A remit is nothing but a limit. Now, the pharmacy discipline will focus on drugs and vaccines. And say a surgical procedure, the remit is the remit for the surgeon, let's say. The vaccines will be the remit for a certain other manufacturing body, let's say. So depending on the expertise, there will be different remits for the HTA. So for us, it would be drugs and vaccines. Next slide. Oh, yeah. Okay. Why this word of caution? Actually, the problem with health technology assessment is that you have to work with the data you have that's available. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this principle of GIGO. Charles Babbage, the one who made the difference engine, the early computer, he said, you might have heard of the garbage in, garbage out. So if you have data coming in with very poor quality, what you get out is also poor data quality. So garbage in means garbage out. On 2 occasions, I have been asked, pray Mr. Babbage, rather, if you enter machine wrong figures, will the right answers come out? Not, I am not able to apprehend the confusion that provokes such a question, he says. But I should like to add to you that the edge technology assessment is only to be assessed by the information available. But is the information reliable? Is it reproducible? Is it unbiased? How much of drug-related information can be considered authentic? This is the caution that I would like to place before the pharmaceutical professionals, because indeed, as you go through it, you will realize a lot of the information is not truly reliable because of various factors. factors coming into play, and which is what I'm going to. So let us not have a garbage in, garbage out policy. Let's look at how we evaluate. Now, EBM has many drawbacks. That is evidence-based medicine. EBM is based on meta-analysis and systematic reviews of multiple RCTs. RCTs are expensive and much more RCTs are required than we have. So it ignores individual variations in population norms because RCTs are confined to some different locations. It uses a very small number. There's also a conflict of interest because the sponsors are always interested in the positive result, and there is a publication bias. Publication bias is human nature. Our optimism gives greater importance to what is positive. A lag between conducting RCTs and the publication of results is another problem. So the problem is we give importance to positive RTCs. The companies give importance to positive RTCs. The sponsors want the positive RCTs to be highlighted. So all this leads to a bias. And this is added to what is called the knowledge asymmetry. When buying a car, the buyer decides the brand, the cost, whether it's new or used, etc. But for medicines, the buyer knows nothing. He knows nothing about the mechanism, dosing, ADRs, contraindications, or toxicity. You just know the cost. So this knowledge asymmetry adds to the previously what I said, the conflict of interest and publication bias. So we have many problems: conflict of interest, publication bias, and the knowledge asymmetry coming into play. And this is also bound to affect the quality of analysis in the HTA. So that's the reason why I put it as a word of caution. And that's also the reason why the pharmacoeconomics is so important. And that's also why we have included a session on pharmacoeconomics. And we need to make a more deep understanding study of this. Now, the conflict of interest has been famously documented in many publications. For instance, the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology in 2018 had done a study on 119,679 trials between 2006 and 13. And the industry sponsored 3 times more clinical trials than the others. So the for-profit trials were more. And clinical trials will suffer without pharmacy industry sponsorship because they're very expensive. But the sponsors have a conflict of interest, which also resulted in the systematic review of 30 studies, which find that industry-sponsored trials have better outcomes than non-sponsored trials. In other words, when there is a sponsor who wants a positive results, the chances are that the positive results do come out. We will see many more of such things, how the conflicts of interest play. Individual trials are suspect. Systematic reviews and meta-analysis of trials are absolutely a must because of the suspicious nature of the reporting. Now, meta-analysis of 192 statin trials in 2007, comparing one statin against another or a statin against a different kind of treatment, was done, and industry-funded trials were 20 times more likely to favor statins. Meta-analysis of 542 psychiatric drug trials in 4 journals over 10 years. In this study, industry sponsors got favorable outcomes for their own drugs, 78% times more. And independently funded trials had positive outcomes in only 48%. So the bias is very clear. Price and Krishnan studied all the 45 research abstracts presented at the 2001 American College of Rheumatology meetings, and all the 45 out of 45 trials favored the sponsor. So now, this is one of those glimpses which you should take home with you, where you should not trust all that is published. Now, reason for the overwhelming trial results can be from many reasons. Flaws in clinical trial design, like comparing a drug with a known drug at a suboptimal dose. This is a trick which is very frequently played. Comparing a drug to a placebo, even when there is a good drug available. Choosing patients who have better chance of improvement. Stopping the trial halfway if the results are going good. All this happens. Or not publishing the results that do not favor the sponsor. Of the 7 trials comparing reboxetine with placebo, only 1 had a positive result with just 254 patients, and that was published. 6 trials with 10 times more patients in which reboxetine was not better than the placebo, none of them were published. So publication bias adds to the woes of biased reporting. So these are all lessons which the pharmaceutical professionals must remember if you want the technology assessment to be honest and transparent and effective. Now, reboxetine trials, there has also been a selective reporting. 3 trials with 507 patients showed reboxetine equal to other drugs. All 3 were published. 1,657 patients had data which showed reboxetine worsen. They were not published. And unpublished studies had reports of more side effects, more likely to discontinue reboxetine halfway. And they were more likely to discontinue because of more side effects than other drugs. So these are what is hidden and what is published. There's a distinct difference between them. And these are issues that the HTA people must be aware of. And there is not much that we can do, but let us at least go deeper and examine each case and understand the errors, possible flaws in each of these trials to make a better, assessment of HTA. Now, meta-analysis of 74 FDA-registered antidepressant trials with 12,564 patients was published in Philosophy, the effectiveness as an evidence. And this here they found that 74 FDA-registered trials, 26% with 3,449 patients remain unpublished. 38 trials had significant benefits. 37 were published. 36 had negative results. 1 in 3 were published as negative results. 11 were published but presented in a way so as to seem positive. Now, there is a lot of prevarication. If you go through the papers more carefully, you will find that the language comes to rescue the content. And 22 negative trials never appeared in literature. So these kind of retrospective studies have clearly shown how weak HTA can be with the data that's already available with us. Next, publication bias in clinical research by Easterbrook and Lancet had a retrospective study on 475 projects between 84 and 87, and in May 1990, 284 analyzed by investigators. 52% were published, and statistically significant results were more likely to be published. And chances of publications of significant results went to highly cited journals. Significant results were always welcomed by highly cited journals. And it's better if investigator gives a high rating to the paper, and more if sample size was greater, and better if the observation and lab-based studies, and less for RCTs. Now, publication bias and clinical trials also happen in many other situations. 318 authors were asked if they had any unpublished RCTs. 56 authors reported 271 unpublished and 1,041 published. Of the 178 completed unpublished RCTs, 26 favored new therapy. And I mean, I can go on. There's a lot of numbers for you to go through. Major reasons for failure to publish were negative results, lack of interest, failure to write and submit the trial, more than rejection of manuscript, more than once because of the rejection. Publication bias also affects meta-analysis. Remember, interpretation of significance of positive trials is always a biased picture. Now, publication bias in clinical trials due to statistical significance or direction of trial results. Again, I think I shouldn't be tiring you with the data that I have. It's enormous data. I have collected many of these from. I would like you to read the book study by Ben Golden, a very critical study. It's extremely enlightening and very shocking. And this is what happens in the industry. There's a lot of profiteering that happens unhampered. Now look at this. Positive findings are published 4 to 5 years after study. Negative findings are published 6 to 8 years after study. No significant association between funding, investigators, and sample size. Systematic reviews are systematically biased towards positive results. So how are you going to trust the systematic reviews? That's the gold standard today. Because systematic reviews looks up a lot of data, we believe that's the ultimate truth, but it need not be, because the input is also biased. Now, Now, why is the pharmacist very special in communicating drug-related information? Because pharmas communicate drug-related evidence differently to doctors and patients. And India ignores the second component completely because there's no such thing as a counseling that happens in India. Well, that's beside the point. We'll go to the next point, the replicability of published results. Nature had published in 2012 that 47 out of 53 studies in basic science looking for potential treatment targets in cancer, and they found it difficult to replicate. The recommendation is make it easier to publish negative results. Unfortunately, nobody is fascinated by negative results, and that's where things go wrong. Changes in the incentives so that must happen so that scientists do post negative results. Negative results are important for the patient. It may not be important for the journal. Now, look at the surrogate marker story. Lorcainide is something that is supposed to, Lorcainide is, in 1980, Lorcainide was tested on less than 100 patients, and 50 got Lorcainide, 10 died, 50 got placebo, 1 died. They discontinued the development of Lorcainide. They did not publish the results. Over the next 5 to 10 years, other companies introduced antiarrhythmics and prescribed everywhere to everyone who had an heart attack. This is the wrong method of prescription. Many years later, antiarrhythmics can kill when there was no antiarrhythmia. Only when a patient has arrhythmia should the antiarrhythmics be prescribed. This tenet was violated for a while because they thought that everybody with a heart attack would benefit. And the result was 100,000 deaths in USA from antiarrhythmics, wrongly prescribed, inappropriately provided. Now, in 1993, those who did the 1980 Lorcainide study published an apology. When we carried out our study in 1980, we thought that the increased death rate in Lorcainide group was an effect of chance. Negative data from Lorcainide could have saved 100,000 lives. So it is sometimes possible that negative data also can be very useful. Now, Ben Goldacre, the person whom I have been following quite some time, laments that open access trials, there's a journal by name Trial, it publishes any trial, positive or negative. But negative results are still not getting published because they go missing. It's so prevalent that it cuts into the core of evidence-based medicine. That's what Ben Goldacre says. And the depressing story of roboxetine to repeat roboxetine. Once one study was published, and I think I already mentioned this. Let's skip this slide. The swine flu pandemic, and they also found that the stockpiling of Tamiflu, just as the remdesivir is being stockpiled today in so many countries, Tamiflu was stockpiled heavily during the swine flu episode. And Cochrane reviews found that many Tamiflu trials were unpublished. They tried to get data on the missing trials with Freedom of Information Act requests and harassing different organizations. They found inconsistent data. They were refused access to clinical study reports. 10,000 pages were refused. The full correspondence with excuses and explanations were given by the drug company, and they were all published in the PLOS Medicine. Now, missing data, we don't see this as a problem. We don't see this as a problem because those who see it as a problem think it can be fixed. But the fake fixes like clinical trial registry, if you go into the details, you'll realize that it enables checks on trials which have been published, conducted, or completed, and ICMJ say that they will not publish any trials unless registered before they start. But what happens? The special report on NEJM in 2017, the two key goals of treaty registration is, first goal is to establish a publicly accessible, searchable database with structured information about ongoing trials, to publicly document all trials, help find participants, and permit clinical research finding accrue to the medical evidence base. And the second goal is to provide access to date stamp protocol amendments during the trial. Allows public to track the progress, check if reported results are consistent, and pre-specified protocols are standard. So all these are the professed goals of CT registrations. Now, this is all the late registration, all those things. I will not go into too many details, but please understand that 32% were registered late, and 57% were registered more than 12 months later. Now, ICMJ don't follow their own guidelines. In 2008, a study showed that half the trials published by ICMJ journals were not properly registered. Quarter of them were not registered at all. So the kind of junk that is coming into evidence-based medicine should be shocking to you, and we shall stand. These are all stand testimony to the possible weaknesses in the way HTA is going on today. And I want you all as students to be aware of such fixes and take what care you can to get to the truth. Now, pervasive influence of publication. Why is a hot topic today? I don't think I shall go into it. But remember, the last word is that what is not exciting for science can be important for the patient. And this is where we must play, And the pervasive influence of authority. Goldacre makes a very important statement: absolute weakest form of evidence known to man, and that is authority. But authority is the most powerful form of evidence, unfortunately. Authority of EBM comes in many forms: prestige of the journal, impact factor of luxury journals, reputation of the place where data has generated, image of the authors. Mostly image is a result of being in the right place. If you are in the big institution affiliated to big people, you are a big man. It's not how wise you are, how much you've contributed, etc. Now, the clinical trials is, I think, becoming an opinion more than fact, and the biased picture is emerging because of that. 17 out of 30 trials. I think I'll not waste most time because I'm repeating most of these concepts again with more examples. Let me save you the trouble of going through these later. This is a very interesting thing. You please observe the slides. Okay, if you see this negative, positive, and null. Okay, these blue dots are all null results from. Now, this is actually the outcomes of large trials after mandatory registration. Now, in 2000, the registration happened. See the results after 2000 and see the results before 2000. Before 2000, most of them are positive. No record of harm. There's no harm on this, in this quadrant. Most of them in this quadrant. Now, what happened after? You see, the positive outcomes have come down after registration, and the null findings have gone up, and harm has been added. So what does it mean? What does it mean? It means that registration did achieve some fix, but not much. It still is to be seen how much there is. Now, now the harmful haste of modern healthcare has been, in an editorial in BMJ 2015. The FDA has learned very little from the Vioxx disaster. FDA is reviewing new drugs more rapidly, using quicker supplemental approval, and drugs approved quickly with marginal evidence show that faster review can increase the risk of harm. Now, the cholesterol, this is another big scandal which you should all be, I've been quite surprised also. Annals of Nutritional Metabolism. Overall, an inverse trend has been observed between all-cause mortality and TC-LDL cholesterol ratios. Highest mortality in lowest cholesterol group without exception. It's quite shocking. The elderly, this is universal regardless of where they live in the world. And almost all Japanese studies show that high cholesterol levels increases longevity. Unfortunately, many doctors try to reduce the cholesterol, and the Japanese Atherosclerosis Society first published the guidelines for diagnosis and treating atherosclerosis disease and revised them several times. However, optimal cholesterol or LDL levels in all-cause mortality has not been given. Mortality from cancer in men, respiratory illness, etc., is lowest in the high cholesterol groups. Now, it's quite surprised. Now, there's a hidden agenda, as they quote. The high cholesterol is a major cause of atherosclerosis. However, for more than a century, some have challenged this. But which side is correct? Why can't we come to a definite conclusion? The answer is simple: money at stake is too much to lose. And cholesterol is one of the biggest issues where law of economy governs. Now, the Scandinavian statin trial, which you might have heard about, 30% relative reduction. Now, this is another trick they use. It's a statistical what shall I say, prevarication, so to say. Now, this relative risk reduction is like if three people die in the control arm and two people die in the treatment arm, then you say there's a, 3 has come down to 2, so there's a 50% reduction. but then it doesn't really reflect the absolute value of the study. Now, there are many such things. There's a GT School of Medicine cohort study, the community-based study, a cohort study of 12 rural areas in Japan, 12,334 healthy people, 40 to 69 years, were followed up for 12 years nearly, and all-cause mortality was significantly higher in the lowest cholesterol group. Now, the prospective study in Okinawa also had very shockingly different. In fact, people with high LDL and low TG-HDL ratios had a higher scores in scenery picture memory. In fact, it's very well known that memory is compromised by statins. But why did, interestingly, all the ADRs started surfacing only very close to the patent expiry. Lipitor patent expired in 2011. 25% of Pfizer's revenue was from Lipitor. So they had good reason to quash all this. Now, any solutions? Yes, there are some solutions. A real world evidence is now trying to make it's coming. I don't know. And one of my students who's doing his PhD in Houston wrote to me about it and sent me some of his papers. Healthcare info is derived from outside the clinical research setting, including electronic health records, claims and billing data, product and disease registries, data through personal devices, health applications. The real world evidence complements traditional clinical trials. Clinical trial data may not apply to larger, more inclusive populations, providers, healthcare delivery systems, or settings that reflect actual use in practice, because you know that clinical trials in very highly controlled environments with a lot of attention paid to uniformity and statistical probabilities and so on and so forth, which doesn't reflect the real situation in the world. So the real world evidence is now emerging as an important alternative to clinical trials, but how long it will take to make its impact, I'm not very sure about it. The RWE can also inform, that is real world evidence, can inform therapeutic development, outcomes research, patient care, research on healthcare systems, quality improvement, safety surveillance, and all that. How a clinical setting, provider, and health systems influence the treatment outcomes, and real world evidence can save time and money, give answers relevant to a broader populations of patients. Now, whatever you do not get from your clinical trials under very artificially created situations, plus the publication bias towards positive results, plus the interest of the sponsor, all this might be overcome by entering into more studies from real world income. Now, real world income also has its pitfalls. RW can be misleading because it incorporates diverse types of evidence, and the confluence of large data can confuse. It can be uncertain in quality and provenance also. Analytical tools are by non-experts may not be reliable. There's a shortage of researchers, and analytical designs can generate incorrect, unreliable conclusions if they are wrong. And the two dimensions of RWEs, the first is the setting in which the evidence is generated, that is the study population and the methods used to collect and curate the data. And the second is the methodological approach to conduct the surveillance or research. Now, these are all just emerging areas, and it's important for you. Now, the research settings, traditional versus real world, is quite interesting to go through. The traditional trials go through specific populations, a specialized environment designed to control variability, that is minimize variability, ensure quality, list eligibility criteria very clearly, detailed case report forms are used, extra from medical records, intensive monitoring, then employs specialized research personnel, ensures adherence to well-characterized protocol, defined procedures, and precision in data collection. All this may not be the situation in clinical trials. Therefore, there's naturally a difference. But considering the flaws in clinical trials, in fact, the very systems that demand this accuracy is also creating havoc, as I've just discussed with you. Now, so the clinical trial's advantages and disadvantages. The clinical trial is a powerful tool. Yes, absolutely. About safety and efficacy, reveals the biological mechanisms and therapeutic action, provides pre-market evaluation. It's a regulatory requirement. It gives robust evidence that a treatment may be working. But the internal validity is where the it problem comes. To create internal validity, it sacrifices generalizability. And populations enrolled differ from those in practice. It's not as heterogeneous as it is in real life. And that's where RWE comes in. Few data on interactions with concomitant illnesses and treatment, adherence to therapies, infeasible in practice. So the cost of large traditional trials growing steadily, hence a paucity of large trials. Now, since the trials are very expensive, and since the sponsors have an inherent interest in the positive results from these trials, and because of the conflict of interest that is inherent in such systems, it is very important that we have alternate systems to gather evidence. And HTA cannot survive on evidence that is shaky. And for these reasons, we should and we must give more emphasis to such alternate systems that are emerging. And let's hope there is a move towards that. Now, I don't know about policy decisions being, whether it's in favor of this real world evidence or not. I don't know. Opportunities and concerns and challenges, there are many. Opportunities are that electronic health registers, health records, registries, claims, data, etc., contain rich RWE at point of care. The advantage is that at the point of care, diverse and extremely divergent nature, personal devices and apps. In fact, I heard from Germany that there are, just from listening to the, the cough, the input from the cough, the audio input from the cough, a diagnosis can be made. So it's kind of the diagnosis is based on creating these patterns from large numbers with the help of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, etc., are definitely going to make an impact on the way we handle medical data. And because of the continuous monitoring and data capture, there's a lot more reality in it, and it facilitates a lot of shared decision making. And data from social media is also useful for epidemiological purposes. And just by looking at keywords in Facebook postings, etc., they're able to see an emerging illness develop in societies. These things are just coming in. Now, real world evidence also has concern. It claims data are not collected or organized for supporting research. The data systems are not generally, managed to handle the research question. They're not optimized. The accuracy and reliability from personal devices, etc., are unknown and raise questions about quality and data. Privacy, above all, which is now becoming an obsessive issue. Now, cleaning up the RWE sources, the FDA and NIH working on systems to harmonize data from, electronic health registers, claims data, and registration, registries for monitoring safety and effectiveness of medical devices, building infrastructure, operational knowledge, and capacity for pragmatic research in health systems. Methods for incorporating data from EHRs, etc., into research, they are now trying to develop. Large-scale distributed research networks also help derive patient characteristics from EHR and claims data without review or interpretation. Meaning, this is the raw data can directly enter the analytical pool, and with the help of artificial intelligence, they can be cleaned up and interpreted as the systems are developing. Allows researchers to identify cohorts from multiple data sources. These are all going to really change the picture of real world evidence in the years to come. Artificial intelligence is going to really make an impact, we believe, in these things. Now, major RCTs in real world setting, I have read just two of them, about two of them. The SARC field trial of the polio vaccine, which was one of the first, in which 750,000 children randomly assigned to receive vaccine or placebo, and a larger non-randomized observed control of 1 million receiving the vaccine. So I am not sure about the results. I haven't been able to read deeply enough. The adaptable, the aspirin dosing, a patient-centric trial assessing benefits and long-term effectiveness. That's the adaptable trial was conducted by the National Patient-Centered Clinical Research Network. 20,000 patients are being randomly assigned to one or two commonly used doses of aspirin and to ascertain which dose is better, which dose regimen is better for secondary prevention of cardiovascular diseases. Now, these are certain emerging new trends in real-world evidence, which the students should be, take note of. The young teachers should take note of. A lot of things are happening, and the potential for real-world research is emerging. Real-world research and planned intervention and randomization they are entirely compatible, say experts, and important advance in clinical trial methodology is going to be and implies feasibility of RCTs outside typical clinical trial settings and academic research. This comes as good news if it ever becomes legally, validated and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to come, but then we hope there is some optimism in the air. Now, to sum up, HTA should rethink the veracity of drug-related data. Currently, such communication is dominantly profit-driven, exploits knowledge asymmetry, negligible post-prescription follow-up, especially in India, and negligible pharmacovigilance. India exports drugs to the whole world, but we import all guidelines, data, rules, methods, procedures, systems, etc. Very little drug-related research or data from India is emerging. The bottom line is that legislation alone can change Indian attitude. Unfortunately, it's reverse abroad. In mature democracies, it is the social need that leads to remedial legislation. Like, for instance, the thalidomide tragedy is what increased the regulatory rigor in the West. But in a democracy like ours, it's legislation that seems to create social needs. Like smoking in public was banned, and that's how people stopped smoking. Till then, I think if you see a Satyajit Ray movie, it starts with somebody offering a cigarette. So top-down systems operate better in India. And probably we also have to look at the society in general, its attitudes, etc., before we implement and achieve a change. So I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you very much, and I would very much welcome comments from viewers and listeners. Thank you very much. I don't know if we are going to take questions or shall we move to Dr. Ramangutti. Can I? Are you in a hurry to go back? Hello, I'm speaking to Dr. Ramangutti.
I can be here till 4 o'clock.
Okay, then you can start. Dr. Biju, if you don't mind, shall we give the next session to Dr. Ramangutti?
No problem at all, sir.
Okay, because we are supposed to, we may have to stay on till the next this thing also, after 4 also. That's why, because it might stretch a little. Thank you, Dr. Ramangutti. So with Dr. Biju's permission, we shall have Dr. Ramangutti as the next speaker. Is that okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we have Dr. V. Ramankutti to take charge of the second plenary session. Dr. V. Ramankutti, MD, MPhil, MPH, FIECS, is a research director at Amala Cancer Research Center, Thrissur, epidemiologist and data science consultant, ex-professor, Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute of Medical Research and Technology, honorary chairman, Health Action by People, Trivandrum. Dr. V. Ramankutti has completed his MBBS from Kerala University in Trivandrum, PG DCH from Kerala University, an MD Doctor of Medicine Pediatrics from Kerala University, MPhil Master of Philosophy Applied Economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Has got a Ford Foundation Fellowship to pursue MPH at Harvard University in 1987 to 88 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He is a member of International Epidemiological Association. Today, he will be discussing about HTA and universal health coverage. Sir, please.
Thank you. I am trying to share my screen. Is it possible?
Sure, sir.
Yeah. There is a problem. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a problem with screen sharing. I don't know what to do.
So can you send the slides? I think I can share. I think I can share the slides if you send. Can you try that again, sir?
For me?
Yes. Sir, can you try that again? Or otherwise I can share it if you send me the
I'm trying
slides.
to share this again. Yeah, I'll try once more.
Okay, sir. Done, sir. Cool.
Are you able to see this?
Yes, we can see that. All good, sir.
Okay, is this okay?
All good, sir.
Okay, so good afternoon and thanks very much, Dr. Unikrishnan, for this opportunity. Uh, the topic I was asked to speak on is universal health technology assessment in the context of universal health coverage. Actually, there is a lot of talk about both of these things nowadays, both health technology assessment as well as universal health coverage. So we will just take a look at what these things are as well as what is the link between them. So this is the famous the picture which shows what is universal health coverage. It shows the blue cube or the blue shape inside the larger box is supposed to be what we are able to achieve now. So it is, in terms of health coverage or health care for people with the public money. So what happens is there are three dimensions in which we fall short. One is we don't have enough coverage of populations. There are many people who are totally left out of the healthcare umbrella. Then there even those who receive healthcare, they do not receive all the healthcare that they need. They need a lot more services. So that is second dimension. And thirdly, those who receive healthcare also, it is not free for them. There is a lot of cost which they have to cover on their own. So all these three things need some kind of remedy, and HTA is supposed to be contributing towards this, and I will talk in a moment about what is HTA. So when you have to set priorities for universal health coverage, there are some things that everybody needs to have in terms of health coverage. There are some things which probably can be left to people for their discretion. Uh, but what it is in each context is different. But broadly, we can agree that no state probably can provide everything that people demand in terms of healthcare. No state will fund all your plastic surgery needs, all sorts of things which people may demand if everything is free. So that is not possible. So there, you have to draw this line somewhere. So you have to set priorities, and the task of determining the priority to your service or individual at a given point of time is called priority setting. It is needed because always there are more demands than what we can provide. So this is basically, of course, health economics, which says, it is economics in the sense there are scarcity of resources, and wants or demands always outpace the supply. So we have to prioritize what should come first. So there are levels of prioritizing. One is the macro level, which means the national level or the international level, where you have to prioritize what should be done first and then what comes next, like that. The meso means the state level or within a country, the state or the district level. And then there's a micro level, in the sense even in a hospital, you may have to set priorities on who will get care. A classical example of this is the classical story about who gets the ICU bed. There are any number of examples in the ethics literature on that. Suppose you have only 10 ICU beds and there are 11 people. Who will you prioritize? So is it according to age? Is it according to need? Usually what happens is goes by ability to pay. Whoever is able to pay will get in first. But is that the fair distribution? That's a big question. So prioritizing should not be based on ability to pay. That is the basic principle of universal health coverage. So there is explicit and implicit prioritization. For instance, the urban areas always have more facilities than the rural areas. So we are implicitly prioritizing the urban areas because we don't take an explicit decision that we will give more facilities to urban areas, but it happens all over the world and in every country. So it is something very natural. So that's called implicit prioritization. Sometimes we definitely say that, for instance, the COVID epidemic in many countries like Italy, they specifically explicitly said that ICU beds will not be given to old people because we need to conserve them for more productive population. Now, it may sound very cruel, but when you have 10 ICU beds and 20 people, you have to make a prioritization. And if you don't make explicit rules, what happens is, the people will get into it using muscle power or money power or whatever. So that will become an implicit prioritization. So how do you identify priorities? And it's based on many considerations. At the bottom is the broad considerations like equity. Equity means fairness in distribution, the diversity of the population, supportive environments. Then the population group should be prioritized. There are some population groups like, depends on the value system which is current in the country and in the community. Many countries, children are prioritized, women are prioritized. In some countries, old people may be prioritized. Then, of course, the third important consideration is what is the prevalence and incidence of the disease. And the next one is potential for early intervention. So what is the use of spending resources on something which cannot be cured? That's a big question you have to answer. Well, I'm not saying that it should not be cured or should not be treated, but that is a question when you have to grapple with in priority setting. And the cost to the individual and the community. What is the cost to the individual? What is the cost to the community? What is exactly the cost of treatment? Cost is used here in the sense of the economic cost, which means what is the opportunity cost? That is the what do you give up in order to get this? So that is called opportunity cost. So health technology assessment, when we come to that, is defined as the systematic evaluation of the properties and effects of a health technology. And health technology here may mean anything. It may be it may be a drug, it may be a device, it may be an implant, it may be a new way of vaccinating, it may be a new approach to health education even. So whatever is a change can be called technology, addressing the direct and intended effects of this technology as well as the indirect and unintended consequences. Many technologies, sometimes have unintended consequences which we don't plan for. But when you do a health technology assessment, you have to anticipate this, and is aimed at mainly at informed decision making. That is, it helps the decision maker to prioritize and say we want this rather than the other. So it's always a comparative option. You want A or you want B. So that is called health technology assessment broadly. So these are the way you set about setting your topics for HTA. What is a good topic for HTA in many situations? Again, based on many considerations like the size of the population. That is how many people are affected by this disease. So if there are so many people, large proportion of the population, then probably you need to take it up for assessment. Severity of the disease, comparative effectiveness. So are you talking about great improvement in the health status? For instance, now is the COVID times and there are so many vaccines now being talked about. So definitely, the effectiveness of the vaccine is a very important consideration. So you need to do an HTA on vaccines which are promising. So then you can compare, first of all, what happens if you're vaccinated versus what happens if you're not vaccinated. And then what is the advantage of one vaccine versus the other, like that. Equality, ethics, and equity. Then are the poorer and vulnerable sections facing difficulty in access? Again, it comes out I'm sure it will come up during the vaccination when it comes. Who receives the vaccine and is it fair? Economic impact, household expenditure, is it going to be costly for the household or is it going to be subsidized by the government, all those things. So should the government subsidize it at all? Because is it a completely private advantage that the vaccine brings in, or does it, of course, obviously most vaccines have a lot of public advantage, but economists call the public good. That is, one person being vaccinated helps the other people also. Health sector priority and policy objective, is it a high priority area? Of course it is. So feasibility, and can it be extended very fast? So these are some of the choices. So this is how it goes. You suppose you have a proposed topic for the HTA. First of all, you think about, does a topic of interest address an important unmet need? If it is no, anything, anywhere you say no, then you leave out that topic. So next step is, can the HTA in the topic of interest result in an improved treatment? Is there RCT evidence on effectiveness, diagnostic screening? And finally, what is the intervention interest be measured in terms of survival, quality of life? That is, the benefit also has to be measured. Now you see that HTA proceeds when you already have good evidence. So it is not an RCT. It is not an RCT. It is not a substitute for the RCT. But suppose you have enough evidence from RCTs on two therapies A and B, then the HTA helps you to come to a conclusion whether A should be used or B should be used for similar situations. So the whole process can be broken down into defining the policy question, framing the protocol, systematic review of all evidence. So it goes by reviewing the evidence and then coming to a conclusion. So there is a lot of mathematical modeling and evaluation which is involved. I don't know if Dr. Biju George is going to talk about that. He is good at that. Analysis of further impacts, equity and budget, that is further consideration. HTA is not based purely on the mathematical models. There are other things to be considered too. And finally, you compile the report, and then the government can decide whether to accept your report or not. So that is another issue, because any policy is ultimately for politics driven. So what evidence is needed to conduct an HTA? We need to have evidence on clinical effectiveness, that is the RCT evidence. We also need evidence on cost effectiveness, that is what are the treatment effects, what are the adverse events, what is the improvement in quality of life measured in terms of QALYs, resource use, how much of resources will it use up, and what is the risk, and what is the baseline risk, and what will happen to this risk if you apply this technology. Then of course the things like equity and financial sustainability. So evidence synthesis is a very important part of the HTA, which goes on by systematic reviews and meta-analysis. These are the keystones, that is, these are things on which HTA is built. It's a preferred medium of evidence generation for efficacy or effectiveness of health technology. But sometimes you don't have evidence, and let me say that HTA is a very opportunity kind of tool, in the sense that suppose you don't have enough RTs done so that you have good evidence. So what do? Well, you can't say, either of course you can go ahead and try to generate the evidence, but that it may not be possible at all points of time. So you have to give an opinion with whatever evidence is available, and there are ways. Somebody is talking. Okay, so sometimes you have to give opinion on based on what is the available evidence, and you can always put a kind of a margin of error on that. You can say that there is not enough evidence to say very firmly, but this is what I would feel. So it is to summarize existing empirical research, to take stock of a body of research, identify gaps, organize knowledge, all these things. So, and systematic reviews are conducted by a team rather than an individual. It is not just a review of literature that a PhD scholar or a student does. It is much more than that. There are at least two people, and then you have to independently read the articles and come to independent opinions, and you have to compare those opinions and say And if there is a difference, then you have to have some kind of an algorithm to kind of come to a consensus. And it can even take up to 1 year to complete a systematic review on, and itself nowadays it is emerging as a major area of research, that you can do systematic reviews based on published literature and publish those systematic reviews in very good journals. The major methodological features will be using protocols to guide. That is, any systematic reviews like a study, you need to have a proposal and a protocol which will be reviewed by another person, and then they will decide whether to go forward or not. There should be specific questions, like just like in your research study, there should be a specific question which is to be answered. Then you have to identify aspects of the relevant research as possible. That is the way you do. It's like in your research, you generate a lot of data as much as possible. Here also you do that. Then you have to have an opinion on the quality of the research, and all the papers may not be of the same grade. So you must have some kind of gradation and synthesizing and for research findings, and objective, aiming to be as objective as possible about research to remove bias. So this is what it's a kind of a pictogram showing what exactly goes on in a systematic review. So it kind of draws in all the data, all the articles, and then you synthesizes, and in what comes out is a very short and very powerful communication on what should be done and what should not be done. So, and when it comes to valuing health outcomes, this is for the cost benefit or cost effectiveness analysis. You have to compare the cost with what is the outcome or what is the result of your intervention. And you use various measures like quality of life measures. I won't go into all the details because it's a very complicated area, and the economics literature has generated a lot of things on this. And it's still in a very messy state. People argue about it. There is no one answer, but generally, the EQ5D is used extensively, and quality adjusted life years. That is what comes out at the end, like the QALYs or the disability adjusted life years gained. All these are done to compare one intervention versus the other. And how to do all this is beyond the scope of this particular presentation. So the valuation of health outcomes for people requires the measurement of health status of an individual. And it is not just based on a doctor's opinion or anything, but based also partly on the subject's own opinion, and that is his own or her own feeling, and how much have I improved. So you must have a comprehensive measurement, sometimes using a visual analog scale or what is known as a standard gamble or time trade-off. The visual analog is the easiest, but people extensively use other techniques. And again, as I said, there are a lot of literature on this. We go into this, and this is very country-specific, context-specific. Now we are trying to generate these kind of measurements for India also. The Health Economics Unit at the PGI Chandigarh is doing extensive work on India-specific measures of health utility. So let us hope that you have some of this data soon. If you don't have such data, you use similar indices. Now, generally we use things like what has been generated in Thailand or Indonesia, because they are similar countries. So then, of course, cost and cost analysis on the other side, that you have to. Cost is always a sacrifice made when a given resource is consumed in the program or treatment. So you can have various ways of costing. Again, we haven't gone into that. Top down, bottom up, mix of top down and bottom up methodologies. So you have to outline the aims, decide the perspective, select costing methodology, select a sample, all these. You have to, again, it's a very extensive exercise. So on the one hand, you have to cost. On the other hand, you have to assess the benefit. Then you put these together. So data for economic evaluation, in some cases, all data for performing an economic evaluation can be collected in RCT itself, but sometimes it is not possible and they have not done that. More typically, several data sources need to be combined. So these are two approaches. One is called a trial-based evaluation, other is called a model-based evaluation. Model-based evaluation, they may not come to the same conclusion. Now, control, as you know, the RCTs, we have had an extensive talk on this. Generally, of course, it may take some time. And it doesn't go up to, it doesn't give you literature, or it doesn't give you information on long-term effects. Now, a clinical trial of a new drug may be recently published, maybe just 6 months old. So you don't know what happens after 6 months. But if you do a model-based evaluation, you can use some assumptions and project what will happen probably, and then use that to make your decision. So models allow synthesis and extrapolation, very important. Bring together everything that is known about health technology and extrapolate from the short term to the long term, and explore scenarios which is not explicitly found in the data. And there is no limitation to the number of comparators, and external validity is very important, very much better, even though internal validity, internal validity is not the point here. It's almost always, just like Dr. Unikishan talked about real world data, it is model based. That is also model based, because you take all this and put it into a machine learning model, and then it brings out an answer. Now here the sole point is prediction. So it's not, you are not worried about internal validity much, as long as there is external validity. So this is a model. You can have all these things go into the model. The sensitivity and specificity of tests, treatment effects, resource use. So you can put all this, and then what you also go. Yes. Is there a question? Okay, so you finally come up with a cost effectiveness, cost per quality. So that is the ultimate measure, or what is the what you come out with in a HTA. So this is an example of a comparison of a trial and model-based evaluation. You can see that there's a huge difference between the estimates. So it is not surprising, because that is why generally, most of these agencies like NICE, they usually go in for a model-based evaluation. And then there are things like decision trees and Markov models. Again, I won't go into all that. Decision tree is like, each decision has to more than one probability for what will happen. And then you plug in those probabilities and find out what happens at the end. So that is a simple, intuitive kind of a decision model. But Markov model means each state depends on the previous state. And that you can go on changing that. And a person may come back to a previous state. That is also taken into consideration. Like a disease may be cured, and he may become normal, and then he may go again into the disease. So this is incorporated in the Markov. Again, I won't go into this because it is rather complicated statistics. So good models should reflect the key clinical characteristics, and use the best available estimates, and reflect uncertainty, and be as simple as possible, and be clearly described so that can be replicated. So this is some of the characteristics of good models. So what finally you get is something like this. You have 4 quadrants depending on the cost and the effectiveness on the x-axis and cost on the y-axis. So if you look at the lower left quadrant and the upper right quadrant, you have a question mark whether you need to accept or reject. Suppose you take the upper left and the lower right. In the upper left, you have you're comparing with one technology, and their second technology is less effective, more costly. Obviously, you don't want that, so you reject. There is no confusion about your decision. It's a reject decision. Whereas the lower right quadrant is just the opposite. You have a more effective but less costly technology. By all means, accept. There is no confusion. But in the other 2 quadrants, you have a less effective technology, but it's also less costly. So should we really reject it or accept it? It may be cheaper, but it's not as good as the best. So this often comes to medical decision making when people are not able to afford a technology, but the lesser technology may give a good result. So the doctor is really in a quandary, because whether he or she should advise the best possible and then probably it will lead to financial ruin, or you should accept the lower effectiveness but lower cost also. Same thing with the other quadrant, that is there is something which is more effective, but it's also much more costly. Should you recommend that or not? So these are the areas where there is a confusion. But when it comes to the national or the group level or the community level, this decision is made on various considerations, and each country has limited resources, so you have to prioritize what should be done first. So thus it helps to fill the gap between the two cubes. So then you can do a sensitivity analysis, which means you can change your parameters and see what happens to your decision. So basically it's a tool which helps decision making, whether to accept this intervention in the national program and pay out of public funds or not. So that is the main consideration here. So if you change some of the parameters, will it change the decision or not? So that is what is known as sensitivity analysis. So these are some of the agencies which are doing internationally the HTA in various countries, and in most countries it is consultative. That is, they can only advise government. The government is the final arbiter. But there are countries like Sweden and England, the NICE, National Institute of Health and Care Excellence, which are regulatory. For instance, the NHS, which is completely funded by the public funds, no technology will be available which is not recommended by NICE. Of course, this has also led to a lot of litigation and a lot of public outcry. People want this and that, and then the NICE says no, and then they go to court, and then the politicians take up the issue. All sorts of things happen, but they have so far stuck on to this decision that the NICE is a regulatory body and not a recommendatory body. Now, the HTA in India, which has been developed the recent 2-3 years, ultimately is also probably going to be only recommendatory, but it probably with the development of Ayushman Bharat, which is supposed to cover everybody ultimately and bring in universal health coverage, they probably will go in for technologies which are recommended by the HTA, HTA-IN, which is you can see the website of HTA-IN, which is the India HTA website. They have done so many studies, and the details are available there. But the point is that HTA is not easy to do. There is a lack of trained human resource, cost and time constraints, educational barriers, organizational barriers, poor dissemination of research, lack of local HTA evidence. All these are big obstacles, and limited awareness among policymakers. Now, many policymakers do not understand these complications of this thing, and so that is one of the problems. So I think this is the end of my presentation. So if anybody likes to ask questions, you're welcome.
Yeah, I think questions are welcome. Dr. Ramankuti is ready to answer you. May I have a question? Where do you think we can get trained in HTA? Is there any module where either online, or is there an institutional certification for the skills required for?
The HTA India is conducting a lot of courses, short courses and all. I don't know how it is, how open it is. It is usually meant for their own people, but maybe
Yes.
there is a way to get in. There are a couple of courses, master's courses in HTA in various countries, but they are quite expensive, and it's a very narrow field. So once you spend time and money in a course and you come out and then you don't get a job, it's going to be very disappointing. So unless you are already in the field, I don't think it is worthwhile. Unless, of course, you are very young and you are kind of diving into this field. Maybe you can take the course and decide that this is what you're going to do for your life. So in which case it may be worthwhile. Otherwise, it's a little dicey deciding whether we should spend other. Of course, if you get a scholarship, by all means, and you can try and go. I think there are courses in Thailand, for instance. There we have a tradition of HTA for a long time. So they have an MSc. and that it's available in other countries also. Definitely in I think USA, UK, and all that. So it is definitely available. But short courses, not many. But some of these new HTA centers in India are supposed to have, as their mandate, part of the job is training, and I don't know how they are going to going about it. We have conducted when I was in Sri Chitra and in charge of the HTA unit. We conducted a few courses in systematic review and all that. But of course, there is a limit to the number of people we can train because you can only run so many courses. So, but there are opportunities.
And do you think this can even be a career option for somebody who's serious? Will there be employment for them?
It is. I have seen many people who have made a career out of HTA. So, but then, it takes a lot in the sense it is a combination of epidemiology and economics. So you have to be quantitatively very strong. So that is a very important consideration because it's all juggling with numbers and modeling and a lot of programming and stuff like that. So if you're ready for that and you love that, fine. So that is a good option. Otherwise, advise that, yeah.
Thank you. Is Amala producing any expertise in this where you're working now as director?
Not at all, not at all. I'm only, and I could not do anything so far because of the COVID circumstance. So I took charge in March, but I was staying away because of the disease. So I have to see what can be done. But my mandate is mostly, there is a cancer research center here, and I am kind of looking after its affairs. So it's already going in a particular direction. I'm not changing it very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Please ask questions. If there aren't any more questions, shall we move to the next session? Fatima, please. Is that okay? Dr. Ramankutti?
Yeah, shall I send you the slide if you are interested?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I will be very happy if you can send us the slides. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the very valuable session.
We'll get back to you by email very soon with the feedback and so on.
Sure.
Are you leaving now? Would you like to leave? Or will you stay back?
Take a little more time. So.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll have the third plenary session right now. So moving on to the third plenary session of the day, I welcome Dr. Biju George to discuss about pharmacoeconomic evaluations, a major HTA need. Dr. Biju George, Associate Professor in Community Medicine, Government Medical College, Kozhikode. He has completed MBBS from Government Medical College in 1999, MD in Community Medicine, Government Medical College, Kozhikode in 2006, and PG Diploma in Applied Statistics from Gandhigram Rural University in 2006. He has also got Applied Population Research Gandhigram Rural University in 2006, a PG Diploma, an MPhil in Clinical Epidemiology from Kerala University of Health Science 2018. He was a postdoctoral research fellow, School of Medicine and Dentistry in University of Western Ontario, London. He has become a facilitator for more than 25 problem-solving for better health workshops conducted in various medical colleges across India, organized by Health Action by People India and Dreyfus Health Foundation USA for medical and nursing undergraduates. He has also become a facilitator for more than 75 research methodology workshops conducted for faculties and postgraduates in various medical colleges in Kerala by HAP or different institutions and by KUHAS. I request Dr. Biju George, sir, to take charge. Sir, please.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for inviting for me to this session. So my topic given is a pharmacoeconomic evaluation, a major HTA need. And these are the things that I will basically talk. and why pharmacoeconomic evaluation is needed in HTA. Then we'll talk about what is meant by the pharmacoeconomic evaluation. Then we'll go on to different types of economic evaluation. We'll talk a little bit about incremental cost effectiveness ratio, how it is calculated and how it is interpreted. And we'll go into a little bit about the ways of doing an economic evaluations also, and then we'll summarize. So if you remember Unnikrishnan sir's presentation, one of his second sentence was how HTA was defined. So if you look at it, it is basically evaluation of the properties and effect of a health technology. Now, it is always compared against another technology. So a new technology is always compared against another technology, so that we get an idea about whether the new technology is better in certain terms, and this will help us to make informed decision making. Now, if you look in that aspect, drugs and implants, etc., become one of the major technology that is being evaluated today. So if you look at the published articles, you will find that the majority of the articles, maybe 90% or more than 90% of the articles that is published today deals with the drugs and other pharmacological things. The other non-pharmacological things comprise only a very small portion of the other technologies that we generally evaluated. Now, what is health economic evaluation? Economic evaluation is nothing but a comparative analysis of alternate course of action in terms of the cost and consequence, which basically means there are two or more than two course of actions are available, and we are looking at the cost and consequences. Now, an important concept in economics is that resource is always scarce, which means you need to utilize the available resources in the best possible manner so that we can maximize the benefit based on the available inputs, so that we can prioritize, and economic evaluation generally tend to help us to do this. Now let us understand that scarce concept and prioritization, which has to be used concept. Let us start with a very simple situation. We have two drugs. Drug A, let us say these two drugs are two antibiotics used for the treatment of pneumonia. Drug A has an 80% cure rate. Drug B has a cure rate of 70%. Now, suppose I say, given this information, which drug will you choose? Invariably you will choose drug A. There is no question. When I give only this much information, you will only say that I will only choose drug A because drug A produces 80% cure rate compared to the alternate, which is producing only 70% cure rate. Now, let me give you one more piece of information. The drug A costs 1,000 rupees for the treatment, while the drug B costs 500 rupees for the treatment. Now, if I have only 10,000 rupees, if the institution have only 10,000 rupees allocated to them, and with that 10,000 rupees, they can treat 10 persons with drug A, and that treating 10 persons with drug A will lead to utilization of this 10,000. And if you treat 10 persons with drug A, 8 will get cured out of this 10 persons. Okay, it is simple math. I have only 10,000 rupees in our hand in the hospital, and if the hospital can only spend 10,000 rupees for this treatment, so that means 10 people, if they are put on drug A, that will spend 10,000 rupees, and only 8 people will be cured out of this 10 because 80% is the cure rate. Now, suppose instead of spending on drug A, I am going to put it on drug B, then I can treat 20 persons because the drug B it's only costing 500 rupees per person. So 20 person I can treat, and 20 person will take up that 10,000 rupees. Now, if I take 20 person, if I treat 20 person, the 70% cure rate will produce a 14 cure rates, or 14% would be cured out of this 20. Now, very simple. If you look, the amount of money that you can spend is same, 10,000 rupees. And if you are choosing drug B, you find that you can produce 6 additional cures. Okay, 6 additional cures. Now, this is very important. Now, suppose you are in heaven. Suppose you are in heaven. There is no limitation to the resources. Whatever money you ask, you can always gain it. Whatever money you ask, you can always gain it. In that kind of a scenario, you'll always choose drug A because you are not concerned with money. You are not limited by the 10,000 rupees. You are not limited by 1 lakh rupees. In that particular scenario, you will only choose drug A. So in heaven, you will only choose drug A. Now, while in the other case, in hell, there is no resources at all. You are not given any freedom to take any resources at all. So in that case, you cannot take any of them. You cannot choose even drug A. You cannot choose drug B. You don't have any choice at all. Now, but when we look at our own country or any other country, they are not in heaven. They are not in hell. They are in between these two states. So they have to make a decision. Should I choose drug A or should I choose drug B? If I choose drug B, I can treat more number of people and get an additional cure. But drug A produces more better cure. So if I have maximum amount of resources that can I spend, if I have plenty of resources that I can spend, I will choose drug A. But if my resources is restricted, maybe I will choose drug B. So that is where the economic analysis actually come into play to decide, should you choose drug A or should you choose drug B in a given scenario? Okay. Now, when you talk about economic evaluation, there are different kinds of an economic evaluation. One is a full economic evaluation, which we will be talking in detail. But there are a lot of partial economic evaluations also. So how do you look at the economic evaluation? One thing that you have to decide is, when you talk about input and output in an economic evaluation, input is always measured in cost. Okay, input is always measured in cost. So whatever amount of money you spend, whatever amount of human resource you spend, whatever amount of material you spend, they are all converted into cost. So that input will always be measured in terms of a cost. Now the output, it would be different ways of measurement. Output may be measured in actual. Okay, it may be in actual clinical unit. It may be in a semi-clinical unit, not exactly a clinical unit, but in a somewhat clinical unit, or it may be measured in cost. And the analysis will differ depending upon what kind of output it is. So first question to think about whether it's a full economic evaluation or partial economic evaluation is whether both input and output is measured or only one input or output is only measured. Second thing that we should consider is whether there is a comparison of alternatives are there or not. Okay, now if there are comparison to alternate two or more alternatives are there, and if both input and output are measured, then we will be using a full economic evaluation. All others are only a partial economic evaluations only. Now we will focus mainly on the full economic evaluation. Now there are 4 main categories of economic evaluations, and these are the 4 things: cost minimization, cost effectiveness analysis, cost utility analysis, and the cost benefit analysis. Now, when you say cost minimization, what it means is that after you did the study, you finally end up with same level of output. We said output is measured in some kind of a clinical unit. The output that you measure finally end up the 2 interventions or 3 interventions you measure has the same level of output. Like both the group have exactly 80% cure rate, or both the groups have exactly 100% cure rate. Now, chance is that it will never be like that, but only in certain scenarios it may be like that. In that case, because the output is exactly same, you just have to compare the cost only. So whichever intervention has lower cost, you will consider that as a more effective method, more efficient method. So that technology is called, so that technique is called as a cost minimization technique. Whichever technique has a minimum cost will be considered as more efficient. So that is more cost efficient, cost minimization. Now the other things, cost effectiveness, cost utility, and cost benefit analysis are differentiated based on the outcome parameter. We said input is always cost. Output may be different. If the output is in clinical unit, if the output is actually in clinical unit, then you call it a cost effectiveness analysis. Now, if the output is in a semi-clinical unit, that means generally it is measured in a DALI or a QALY, then it is called as a cost utility analysis. Now, if the output is actually converted into the cost itself, then it is called as a cost benefit analysis. We'll talk about each one of them separately. Now, the cost effectiveness analysis, as I mentioned, outcome is in clinical unit, which basically means it's a natural unit that we generally observe as a health practitioner, like number of persons survive, maybe the success rate, maybe the reduction in certain quantitative value, maybe the number of cases prevented, maybe the number of person years gained for a cancer patient, etc. Many often we may use person years gained, etc. Now, one of the disadvantages of a cost effectiveness analysis is that it can deal with one outcome at a time only. If there are two outcomes are measured, you have to conduct two cost effectiveness analysis for that. So if one drug A is more efficient for one outcome and drug B is more efficient for another outcome, then to make a comprehensive interpretation, it may create certain problem. Plus, as I mentioned, it cannot deal with 2 or 3 different outcomes. So that is one of the disadvantages of cost effectiveness. Plus, if you are dealing with 2 different conditions which produce entirely different outcome. For example, pneumonia you are treating with an antibiotic and see what is the cure rate. You are using an anti-diabetic drugs and looking at the glycemic control. You want to compare these two. The outcomes are entirely different thing. One is a glycemic control, one is a cure rate. You cannot compare it with a cost effectiveness analysis. In that scenario, cost effectiveness analysis cannot be performed. So the cost utility analysis come to play in that place. Here, it is converted into some kind of a semi-clinical unit. That means they are either measured in terms of a quality adjusted life years, or they are converted into disability adjusted life years. And the way of converting this health outcome into this health status value is basically called as a health valuation. So I'll just explain what is this DALI and the QALY. And DALI, we always talk about the DALI averted. Now, DALI has 2 components, life lost due to disability and life lost due to death. Now, let us say, for an example, in Kerala, the average life expectancy for female is 76 years. Okay, so one female develops stroke at 61 years and she becomes hemiplegic. And she remained hemiplegic till the age of 65. At that time, she developed another stroke and met with the death. Now, 61 years, she had stroke. 65 years, till 65, she was in stroke. And then till she was supposed to live till 76 if she didn't develop these strokes. Okay, so she was supposed to live till on an average 76 years if she didn't develop the stroke. But she developed stroke at 61 and lived till 65. And 65, she died just because of another stroke. So that means 65 to 76, there is 11 years lost due to early death. So that is that 11 years death, early death. Now, between 61 to 65, there is a 4 year. That 4 years she lived, but she lived with paralysis, hemiplegia, which means she is not in perfect health. So there is a weightage for DALI for that. and the weightage for DALI with a hemiplegia due to stroke is 0.92. So what does that 0.92 mean? It basically means that if one person live 1 year with that thing, it is equivalent to 0.92 years of death and 0.08 years of perfect health. So if one person lives with hemiplegia due to stroke, it means if we can separate it as a death, complete death and perfect health, it actually means 0.08 years of perfect health, 0.92 years of perfect non-health. That means death. So that means the person lived in that death status for 4 years. That will add up to 3.68. When you add up together these 2 years, you'll say that this particular person has lost 14.68 DALI, disability adjusted life year, due to the stroke. Now, this is for one person. You can measure this for the group of person, and you can say on an average, the whole population lost this much DALI, or you can say on an average, the average DALI loss was this much years, etc. So that is a basic DALI concept. The same way, there is another concept called as a quality adjusted life years. It has two components, just like the DALI. There is for a DALI, there is a DALI weightage and multiplied by a year. Here also there's a utility weightage multiplied by the years of life in that particular utility. Now, how do you measure? The years in utility we can always obtain by seeing how many years they survive with that disability and other things. But how do you measure that utility weightage? Utility weightages are usually measured using either of these three tools, easily available tools: EQ5D, SF6D, or HUI. HUI is a health utility index. Now, I'll just explain the EQ5D because EQ5D is the very commonly used one. There are two different versions of EQ5D, EQ5D 3L and EQ5D 5L. Now, if you look at the 5 domains here for the EQ5D, these are the 5 domains. These are the 5 domains, and in each domain you will find there are three levels of the question, which is why it is called as an EQ5D 3L questionnaire. So now the recent version, what we use commonly now is an EQ5D 5 level questionnaire. So instead of these 3 levels, you convert it into 5 levels. So these 3 levels, I am just reading these 3 levels. I have no problems in walking. I have some problems in walking. I am confined to bed. Now, let us say a person has certain disease, and now we are asking him to score this. Let us say he said that I have no problems in walking. So that means he's in the first level. So for the mobility, the score is 1. For self-care, he also said that I have no problems with the self-care. So the score is 1 there also. Usual activity, he said that I have some problem with performing my usual activities like study, work, family, leisure activity, housework, etc. So that level is 2. He said that he has moderate pain or discomfort, that is level 2. And he said that he has severe anxiety or depression associated with that illness. So he has level 3. So his score is actually 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. We don't add them up. We just say that his score is 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. And then there are certain softwares which can help us to convert this score into a utility weightage. And remember, utility weightage range between 0 and 1. 1 means they are in perfect health. That means they are in the perfect health. 0 means there is no health at all. That means they are in a state of death. So if you have a 0.38 utility score, that means utility is actually very low. Their health is actually low. Now, we said about utility weightage or valuation. That valuation depends upon the country. And for India, now we don't have a valuation set available. PGI Chandigarh has already developed a valuation. It is still not published, but within 2 or 3 months, it will get published. So we are all awaiting for that valuation sets for India so that we can utilize these valuation sets. Now, remember, your utility will always change with age, disease conditions, duration of illness, etc. For example, if you look at the age, as the age increases, their utility declines, which you expect normally. As you increase the age, your health status actually declines. So that is what it is mentioned here. Now, disease condition, if you look, unstable angina has only 77% of the normal people of the corresponding age. Their utility is only 77% of the normal corresponding age match control. Now, if you look at a stroke patient, that's 63. That means they have a very lower quality of life, lower utility value compared to an unstable angina patient. Type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes person, most of the person don't have much of a problem. Their utility value is much higher. Now, look at the disease. After 6 months of illness, unstable angina, it didn't change much. 77 to 80, it didn't change, because a person with unstable angina, whatever utility is now, 6 months later also, even with treatment, the utility didn't change much. It will improve, but it don't drastically improve. But let us look at this MI patient and how his utility improves. Once a person develops an MI, he is bedridden, he has a lot of pain. So his utility is very low, very less. But after 3 months, 6 months, he goes back into his usual activity with a little bit restriction. So his utility score improves a lot there. So it changes with the disease, it changes with the duration of illness and other conditions, etc. Now, for each individual, you can measure their particular utility value. That particular person may be at start by 0.8 utility, and then he developed a severe illness, utility come down during that time period, and then it came back after treatment, and then it remain in one level, and then another illness utility come back very down, and then increase. So that utility for an individual vary like this. Now this is shown as a for the two groups. This is shown as a two groups. That means a group of people are studied in the two interventions. So this is what we shown is actually an average utility curve only over the time period. We can always look at what is the utility value here at that particular point, and how much time they spent, in that utility, and add up it over a time period, the utility value multiplied by the time, utility value for the corresponding utility value corresponding multiplied by the time, and this here, the utility value is 0. So multiplied by the time, it doesn't matter then. So you can get a utility value for this particular without an intervention, and you can also measure the utility value for the other group, second group. And then based on it, you will find out that this much is the difference in the utility. This part is the difference in the utility between the two intervention groups. So that much part is the quality adjusted life year gained due to the new intervention. Quality adjusted life year gain due to the new intervention. So you can always measure the quality in a very easy manner if you are using an EQ5D or a SF6D scores, etc. Now, if you are using a cost benefit analysis, we are converting the outcome in the cost terms. And how do you convert a person who is blind because of an intervention, or how you convert a person who develop a severe complication due to the intervention? There are certain economical methodologies, which is basically called as a willingness to pay approach. So you can use that willingness to pay approach to convert a health status into a monetary term. But what's the problem? The problem is most of the health persons, we don't like that concept. So for example, suppose you are asked, okay, how much money would you give to prevent to shift your death 1 year later? How much money you are ready to spend if you want to shift your death by 1 more year, make it 1 more year later? But from an economist point of view, they can always convert a health status into an economic perspective from that. So many often the cost benefit analysis is not used by the health person, but mostly used by an economist. A health person mostly use a cost effectiveness analysis or a cost utility analysis. Now, how do you summarize the results in an economic evaluation? basically we are going to use something called as an incremental cost effectiveness ratio. Very simple. You calculate the difference in the cost between the two groups, which we call it as a delta cost. And we also calculate what is the difference in the effect, which we call as the delta effect. Take a ratio of that delta cost to the delta effect, and that will give you the incremental cost effectiveness ratio. Now, how do you interpret? Very simple. It is the additional cost required to produce 1 unit of the good outcome compared to a standard treatment. Now, let us calculate, just to make an understanding, let us calculate example. 2 drugs, these are the 2 costs, and these are the 2 outcomes. Okay. So when you write the drugs here, A and B, here I have written A and B, but ideally what we first should do, we look at these 2 costs, see which cost is lowest. 76,000 is lowest. So first we will write the cost in an ascending order. And okay, so 76,000 is lower costly, so corresponding drug is written on the first line. Same way we write the effect. So for drug A, the effect is only 5% mortality. Drug B is only 4% mortality is reduced. Now the next step is to find what is the difference in cost. So 1,08,000 minus 76,000, which is I think 32,000 rupees. And the effect is actually 1% reduction in the mortality. Now this delta cost divided by the delta effect will give you this incremental cost effectiveness value. Now, what does this 32,000 mean? Now, if it is in rupees, what does this 32,000 rupees mean? To reduce 1% mortality with the new intervention compared to the standard intervention, you have to spend 32,000 rupees additionally. Now, the standard intervention, you need to spend certain amount of money. You need to spend an additional amount of 32,000 rupees to gain 1% reduction in mortality. That is what the ICER means in this particular situation. Now, when you say ICER, it is called an incremental cost effectiveness ratio. That term incremental is very, very, very important. Now, if you have 3 interventions, 3 or more interventions, that means more than 2, suppose you have a standard drug, drug X and drug Y, in increasing cost. Standard treatment is the least costly, drug X is next costly, drug Y is the most costliest. Then when you calculate the incremental cost effectiveness ratio, it is always incremental. That means standard versus drug X is the first ICER that you will calculate. You will calculate this ICER first. Drug X versus standard, because drug X is the next costly intervention compared to standard. Now, once you calculate it and if you find it is acceptable, then the next question comes, is drug Y also cost effective compared to drug X? So it is only incremental to the previous step only. Drug Y is never compared to the standard treatment. Drug Y is only compared to drug X, the next less costly intervention only. Now, if you have pen and paper with you, could you just calculate the ICER for these situations? Just to make sure that you understand the concept of calculation of ICER. I'll give you two minutes, and after 2 minutes, I will also start writing. So for those people who don't have a pen and paper, you can just think about what will you put in the cost and what will you put in the effect, and how will you calculate the delta cost and how will you calculate the delta effect. Once you calculate delta cost and delta effect, ICER is already there. If you have already done something, you can just put it in the chat box also if you want. And remember, this column we will always write in terms of an increasing cost. So this is, next is, and the next is, So effect also, it is very simple. Now, how do you calculate the delta cost here and delta cost here? That's the basic thing. If you are able to calculate this, then you understand the concept about incremental cost effectiveness ratio. Here, there is not much confusion. You are comparing this to this because we are saying B to A, that's what we are comparing. There is no confusion. So that means you have to put in 32,000 here, and 5 minus 4, that means 1% here. What about here? What about here? Remember, this is incremental. So which means we are comparing C to B only. So what is this difference? That is what you are going to put in, which means you are going to put in only 1,26,000, I think, 1,26,000, and this percentage, 4% and 2%. So difference is 2% only. Now 32,000 divided by 1% is 32,000. So ISR is 32,000. And 1,26,000 divided by 2% will give you 63,000 rupees. So now, how do you interpret this? The least costly is the standard treatment. Drug A, if it is a standard treatment, now we are going to say that drug B, the ISR is 32,000. So if you have to spend 32,000 rupees to gain 1% reduction in mortality. Now you are putting the question to the policymakers. Are you ready to spend 32,000 rupees for 1% reduction in mortality? Now, if they say yes, very well and good, then you can choose B. Okay. Now, once you choose B, the next question comes, because now C is also there, which produce a little bit reduced mortality. Now the question comes, are you ready? If once you are adopted B, are you ready to spend another 63,000 rupees for further 1% reduction in mortality? If the government policymakers say yes, then you can choose A. But if the policymaker, no, I cannot spend that much amount of money now, then you will say, oh, only B is cost effective there. Only B you will utilize. So this is how ISR values actually move, how you go about it. Now, Tamguti sir was talking about the cost effectiveness plane. So I'll explain it in a little bit way also. Now, look at the axis. In the y-axis, you have the delta cost. In the x-axis, you have the delta effect. And for our previous intervention, we said that we have a 1% improvement and a 32,000 rupees as our cost. So a 1% as a delta effect, 32,000 rupees as a delta cost. So this is delta effect and this is delta cost. So that will produce a place here. Now this I have put a mark here because to make sure that this is what our standard treatment is. So the axis where it meets at 0 is where our standard is. So compared to standard, this drug A has this much level. Now, if you put drug B compared to this, which has an additional 2% delta cost, and I think it's a 63,000 further from this. So it would be somewhere here. It will be somewhere here. So when you draw the curve, it would be like this one. Okay. So how do you look at this curve now? Now look at this. So this is your ISR value. First, suppose the curve comes here. Suppose the curve is like this, not like the other one, previous one. What does it mean? This means effect is more, the new intervention, drug B, is more effective and it is less costly. This is more effective and less costly. So there is no question this intervention would be immediately taken up. So anything which fall into this quadrant will immediately accept this, and we will call this as a cost saving strategy. Cost saving strategy. Now look at this. Suppose the ICER falls here. That means the cost is actually more, effect is actually less. More costly, less effective drug. We will never choose this drug. Immediately we will reject that drug. This we will say is not an acceptable scenario at all. So we will reject that thing. Now, if it falls here or if it falls here, that means that here it means it's more effective, but it is more costly also. More effective, but more costly also. If it falls here, it is less costly, but also it's less effective. This scenario don't happen generally, but can happen also. This is a scenario where most of the time the new drugs come in. Most of the new drugs are more costly, but a little bit more effective than the conventional. So if it falls in this particular scenario, then you need a what we call as a threshold value also. The threshold value is based on a community perspective. So the society has to make a decision, what is our threshold? So if we say this is 32,000, and if the community threshold is, let us say, 1 lakh rupees, if the community threshold is 1 lakh rupees, then you will say that, oh, 32,000 is much lesser than the community threshold of 1 lakh rupees. So 32,000 is cost effective actually. But suppose the community threshold is not 1 lakh. Suppose the community threshold is only, let us say, 20,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees. Then you will say that this 32,000 is much higher than the community threshold of 20,000. So it is not cost effective. So threshold is very important, and that's where many often the countries vary, because we said few countries have a lot of resources, so they can put the threshold at a higher level. If the country has lower amount of resources to spend, then the threshold will naturally would be set at a lower level. Like in India, we may put it at a much lower level than the US or the UK or the well-developed countries, etc. So that is how we look at the cost effectiveness play. Now, how do we generate ICER value? Ramakuti sir was talking about this, so I will not go into details. He said there are two ways by which we can deal with. One is a clinical trial. Sir talked about certain disadvantages of the trial, because it's generally trials is shorter duration. All the important outcomes are not measured. All the input and output may not have been measured. So that is why we go many often for the decision analytical model. Decision tree or Markov model are the two very commonly used models. So this is how the model works, in a very simplistic manner. Suppose you have two drugs. Let us say these drugs are for treatment of, let us say, Nipah infection. So there is some 30% cure rate is what you expect generally with the Nipah. Suppose you have a new drug which produces a 50% cure rate. And the cost for that drug, and if you survive, what is the outcome? And if you don't survive, what is your quality of life? Or you can measure the cost and the quality. And then based on it, you can calculate how much cost would be required. For example, if you go by this pathway of drug A, your total cost requirement would be 68,000 and your total quality would be 0.38. If you go by this pathway of drug B, your cost would be 80,000 and the quality would be 0.8. And that way of calculating it back is what we call as a rollback function in a decision tree analysis. So I'm not going to detail how you actually do it, but there is something called as a rollback function, and you can calculate it, and based on it, you can put it into your ICER table and calculate the ICER. So we can use a decision analytic model or decision tree model to calculate ICER, or we can use a Markov model if you have repetitive stages associated with the diseases. For example, a stroke patient may once develop stroke, he may directly die, or he may recover back and go back to the normal. When he become a normal, sometime later he can again develop a stroke. That's another issue. A stroke patient may remain with hemiplegia without curing and remain in the completely paralyzed state for a longer duration also. So these are certain replicative states. Normal person go back, normal person we can remain in the normal. When you are dead, you will remain in the dead state. Now, if you look at these two groups, this is drug A group and drug B group. These two drug groups have a difference in the cost for the two treatments. These two groups also have a difference in the cure rate. Also a difference in the cure rate from the stroke to death or the stroke to normalcy. There is a difference in the rate, and you can run this cycle for either 10-year or a lifetime scenarios, etc., and then calculate the total cost associated with it. Now, when you do an analysis, there is always an uncertainty in the analysis, because you are only doing study in a small sample. You are not doing study in whole population. So every economic analysis has to be supplemented by the uncertainty analysis also, which is basically what we call as a sensitivity analysis. So there are two strategies. One is called as a deterministic strategy, and the usual graph that we produce based on a deterministic strategy is called as a tornado diagram. Now, if you look at this is ICER based on the study. And if you look at the survival benefit, that produces a huge variability in the ICER. So survival benefit can highly influence your ICER calculation. But while the utility for nausea, vomiting can only influence it very, very little bit. Very small differences only it can produce. The other way of analysis, sensitivity analysis, is called a probabilistic analysis. What we generally do is something called a Monte Carlo simulation, and you get a curve something like this. Each of these dots actually represent an ICER value generated based on a small sample taken from that your study subject. Based on, so let us say you are taken 500 study subjects for your study. After 500 study subjects, you are taking a small sample from it, studying the delta C and delta E, dropping them back into population, taking another sample, and this sampling procedure will be repeated from your original sample multiple times, 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 times, and each replicate will produce a ICER values, and they will produce a curve like this. Based on the replicate, you can calculate the mean ICER values and the corresponding 95% confidence intervals. So these are the 95% confidence interval, and this is the mean ICER values. So I think that's what I was saying. In summary, we were saying that pharmacoeconomic analysis has a major role in the HTA. We have said that cost-benefit analysis is mostly preferred by the economists, and the healthcare workers prefer cost-economic and cost-effectiveness, cost-utility analysis or cost-benefit analysis. And we also talked about ICER, incremental cost-effectiveness ratio, and how it is important, how it should be interpreted. And we also said that we may need modeling strategy to tackle out special situations also. So that's all. Thank you for your time. If you have question, either you can put it now or at the end, it depending upon whatever is the decision by the organizers.
If anyone have any questions, I think they can ask right now. If anyone have any questions regarding the topic. So.
Sorry, there was some delay in there was some visitor. I'm very sorry. Thank you very much. Is it unmuted? Yes. Okay. I'm sorry for the delay. There was some visitor. So how is the, suppose we have many drugs like this, it becomes very complicated to, you need a lot of analysis, multiple isn't it?
Yes, true. But when you have multiple drugs, when you initially start creating the tables, there are certain things called as a dominance and extended dominance. So they will be immediately eliminated. And I have not introduced that concept. I don't want to confuse other people there. So once that dominance and extended dominance are eliminated, then probably even with the 8 or 10 strategies, it will reduce to 5 or 6. And then with that 5 or 6, you have to do the ICER calculation and then make a decision. Now, if you have to do a modeling, then it involves a little bit more of works involved. But it's not much of a problem. Only thing is you have to know how to do the modeling strategy, how to do the modeling, how to do the coding and other things, etc. And if you don't know, get the help from a good statistician who do this modeling and other things, etc. Then they can help you out in creating that model. More number will generally increase more challenge. That is true, but it can be done.
No, another thing about drugs is that it is not only efficacy, but it's also the ADRs, etc. comes into picture. So
True.
how are these reconciled? The efficacy versus
True. So that is where the cost utility analysis is many often score better than the cost effectiveness analysis. In a cost utility analysis, you are both looking at a positive effect, negative effect, because if the patient develops a side effect, his utility score will come down immediately. So that bad effect is also taken into consideration if you do a cost utility analysis. Now, on the other hand, if you do a cost effectiveness analysis, you will have to do a cost effectiveness analysis separately for each outcome, both each separate positive outcome, each separate negative outcome, you have to do a separate analysis. And sometimes the final interpretation becomes messy with a cost effectiveness analysis, which is the advantage. Basically, that's where the cost utility analysis actually score, because it converts every kind of an outcome, whether it's a positive or a negative outcome, it converts every outcome into a single metric into the utility score, and the corresponding time stayed in that particular utility score. You convert it into a quality adjusted life year, and then you can use it very effectively.
Thank you very much. Is there any certificate course or some such thing, any readily available online material or whatever, or book or textbook which you would prescribe for us?
Okay, there are a lot of books that are available now. There are a lot of publishers now going. So I'll, if you are interested in a course, what I would suggest is that PGI Chandigarh is doing, I think, a diploma course, PG diploma course in health economics, basically. So I think 2 different sets of courses, one basic course and one advanced course is that can be chosen.
Is it valid? I mean, like, do they issue a certificate?
Yeah, they issue a certificate.
No. And it's paid. You have to charge.
Yeah,
you have to pay for it.
It is paid. Yes, it is paid. But will it add very good thing? I'm not that 100% sure. Now, just with that certificate of a diploma course, it may not be very good. You need some basic background with this plus an additional economic component. That's good. So if you plan to become a more of a health economist, then probably you should do some kind of an MSc in health economics or MSc in some kind of an economic modeling or MSc in some kind of an HT analysis, etc. Now, but if you do as a researcher who also want to be involved in economics, learning these strategies is more important. So for that purpose, a diploma will give you a basic background thing from where you can actually build.
Yes, thank you very much. I would be happy if others ask as well. Unfortunately, the task of asking questions, I am asking questions which others might have liked the answers for. In the sense, most of them are, I found, are career-oriented questions. And that's what I've encountered in most assemblies, not truly academic questions. Because that's a major issue now. About, there's a lot of anxiety among students. They just want to somehow get rid of this, get into a useful position. Is there any, this is another question to both Dr. Ramaguti and you. Are there any systems where we can get ourselves affiliated to research bodies who want answers for this? We have got some student power, and we already have done some papers which have, I mean, with Boston University we have done some. If there is any such affiliation possible at a formal level where our students will actively participate in some problem solving, even generating data, we'll be very happy. If any of you have any possibility of tying up with us, we have showed we in fact got some prizes also in that Harvard Public Health Conference. Our students, in fact, one of them who's got the prize is going to be presenting. So, oh yeah, I'm sorry, it was without the video. Okay, but I hope I conveyed my impressions to you. I'm grateful to Dr. Biju. And if there's any further question, is there anybody else? I don't want to be monopolizing the question hour. If there's somebody else, unfortunately, we don't have a very enthusiastic group of students, unfortunately. If there's somebody, I would be very happy to get them to ask questions. Otherwise, I'm afraid we have to wind up and move to the next program. Thank you, Dr. Biju, for that in fact, I think we really learned a lot. I was following up. Yeah. Okay, is it, am I audible? I'm told that I'm not very audible. Is it okay now? Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Biju and Dr. Ramangutti too. And we have one more presentation, who was a student till a few months back, who is now working for the George Institute, is a public health student as well, person as well. I think he'll be introduced formally by the person here. Okay, thank you.
So once again, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the very valuable session. Now we have Dr. Gautam Sadish with us. Sir, can you mute it? Can you? Okay.
Sorry.
So we have Dr. Gautam Sadish. I'm extremely sorry for the technical error. Okay, let me welcome Dr. Gautam Satish. He's a global health researcher who focuses on access to essential healthcare for non-communicable diseases in low and middle income countries. He currently works as a research assistant with the George Institute for Global Health in Hyderabad, India. He has published several first-order scientific papers pertaining to access to NCD care in India and co-authored similar papers from Nepal. He has also presented his work at multiple international conferences, including those by the World Heart Federation and European Society of Cardiology. His statewide survey on access to essential medicines for cardiovascular diseases and diabetes in Kerala was awarded the promising paper at a Harvard Global Health Institute collaborative conference in 2019. His work on access to insulin in Bangalore received substantial attention on national media, including the Indian Express, Economic Times, and Times of India. Gautam completed his Doctor of Pharmacy degree at the National College of Pharmacy, Kozhikode. As a pharmacy student, he successfully delivered on multiple projects in collaboration with renowned researchers at the Boston University of School of Public Health, University of Queensland, Nepal Development Society, and the World Heart Federation. Gautam also spearheaded a team of students and teachers in establishing the Institutional Student Chapter for International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcomes Research, wherein he served as the chapter president until his graduation. Gautam has published his research in Tropical Medicine and International Health, Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice, Health and Quality of Life Outcomes, and Journal of Global Health. He will be discussing about access to medicines and vaccines. So let me welcome Gautam. Gautam, kindly unmute.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. Uh, I'll make this a quick session. I just want to. I mean, most of the HTA has been covered by the covered in the last three sessions, and I just want to throw some light on one of the key implications of health technology assessment, that is expanding access to essential medicines and vaccines. And as you know, the healthcare expenditure is increasing rapidly, and this has implications for both healthcare service delivery as well as access. As a result of this, most countries around the world struggle to strike a balance between, maintaining, keeping up with the new and expensive health technology, and at the same time making sure that patients have affordable access to the same new and expensive health technology. This is where HTA comes into play. HTA is very powerful in determining the best option among multiple options and prioritizing healthcare resource allocation. As you know, in many developing countries, the budget for healthcare is often limited. So allocating that to the right resources is very, very important. Now, we've come across so many definitions of HTA today. For those of you who still don't know, health technology assessment refers to a multidisciplinary exercise that examines direct and indirect effects of health technology. As you see in the diagram here, health technology includes drugs, medical devices, diagnostics, and surgical procedures. So the direct and indirect effects of HT on available resources, clinical aspects, cost effectiveness, and other aspects, including legal and ethical issues. This multidisciplinary exercise is called HTA. And what is the goal of HTA? It is to generate evidence to facilitate decision making among multiple stakeholders, which includes the payers, the governments, providers, and patients. Two questions have to be addressed before you talk about access. First question is HTA appropriate for all medicines? And the answer is no. HTA is most appropriate for the newer medicines that are often expensive right after they enter the market. There is very limited competition, and as well because it is protected by patent. So for what do you do for older medicines, older generic medicines? You have other policies such as competitive tendering, which is how hospitals in Kerala and most of India procure medicines on large scale. And then there's an option called therapeutic reference pricing. It's most common in low and middle income countries, including India, where we compare with the international reference prices and then use it for price control in our own country. So there is an international reference price listed by Management Sciences for Health, a non-profit organization. MSH International Reference Prices is what the WHO recommends for reference pricing. Also, there are other policies that can be implemented for generic medicines. That is to making sure that doctors prescribe only from the formulary or the essential list, or promoting adherence to evidence-based guidelines, etc. Now, the second question that one has to answer is HTA appropriate for all the countries? Now, HTA, as you know, is now prominent in the higher income countries, and it's still a very new concept in low and middle income countries. So, despite it being such an important need in low and middle income countries, the effective implementation of HTA is difficult in these places because of limited resources, poorly developed regulatory frameworks, and a lack of decision making transparency. So these countries can incorporate HTA through use of international guidelines and essential medicine lists. As Unnikrishnan sir has mentioned, India imports most of the guidelines from the West, and most of the data that India bases its policies on aren't specific to the Indian population, and that's an unfortunate truth. And the capacity for HTA in low and middle income countries should be established early and supported. Of course, there are a lot of barriers and prerequisites, but it is definitely not insurmountable. Now we come to HTA, that's health technology assessment versus access to health technology. These are two very distinct terms. Now, government and medicine reimbursement agencies face the following challenges when a new medicine is brought to the market. An inclusion of a new expensive and specialized medicine on the EML or local formulary comes with a major financial burden. And government and other payers should be well equipped to take rational decisions based on this, especially when it comes to including them in the local formularies. So to inform these decisions, some countries utilize HTA tools. But again, when we talk of the countries, it's mostly prominent in the European country, although Canada uses it and it was definitely first used in Australia. But it's mostly prominent in the higher income countries. Now, the European Medicines Agency has been working closely with many HTA bodies since 2008 who provide recommendations on medicines and other health technologies. Now, there is a growing influence on the access of novel and essential medicines to patients, mainly due to this increased pressure on healthcare budgets. And this is where HTA can improve patients' access. This is why HTA is important when it comes to access. Now, why do we have the concept of essential medicines? The essential medicines concept was established in 1977 to assist countries to select medicines that are the healthcare needs that meet the priority healthcare needs of the majority population in that particular country. Now, the essential medicines list by WHO itself is an HTA process because there is an expert community on selection and use of essential medicines that meet every 2 years, wherein they consider proposals for the deletion and inclusion of medicines, as well as consider the relative clinical effectiveness, safety, and economic data to make this particular decision. In fact, my collaborator from Boston University was successful in altering the essential medicine list last year in collaboration with certain other Indian researchers. If you check out the WHO EML from 2019, you will see that WHO has now included 4 fixed dose combinations for hypertension for the first time, and this was based after a successful application by a group of researchers. So that's how straightforward the process is. If you send an application supported by good data, meta-analysis and systematic review data, then WHO goes through a peer review process and makes a decision on whether that medicine should be included or deleted. Now, a lot of organizations has come up with strategic plans and goals, wherein access to medicine was prioritized. And WHO's medium-term strategic plan prioritizes 80% availability of essential medicines across all facilities, as well as price ratio. That is, the prices not more than 4 times the international reference price that I mentioned earlier. So for any medicine, if you take atenolol, if it costs 1 rupee on MSH IRP, it should be ensured that atenolol doesn't cost more than 4 rupees in any of the facilities in India. And any violation, when it crosses 4 times, it's a violation according to WHO. But does simply identifying a drug as essential medicine serve the purpose? I can explain this with the example of insulin, a life-saving medicine to diabetics. Now, until 1920, starvation was the only treatment for type 1 diabetes. Children used to weigh their food, count calories, and even followed starvation diets to stay alive just for a few years. In 1921, Charles Best and Frederick Banting discovered insulin. And with the discovery of insulin, children could now be treated and be saved from death. And following 1922, in the years to come, insulin extraction processes were being further developed, majorly with Eli Lilly. And over the coming decades saw us switch from animal insulin to human insulin and to analog insulin towards the 21st century. Now, today, 100 years since the discovery of insulin, insulin is listed on the essential medicine list of most countries, and several insulin products are available on the global market. We have a lot of analogs, we have short acting, long acting, we have a lot of delivery forms like pen, cartridge, etc. But the big question is, would Charles Best and Frederick Banting be satisfied today, or have we failed them? Because insulin prices have skyrocketed in the United States. Over the last couple of years, it has increased multifold, and there is no without any significant change in the composition. There's no reason to justify this increase in price. And the major reason for this increase is the oligopoly in the insulin market, which is prominent not just in the United States, but all over the world. The insulin market is dominated by 3 companies. There is Sanofi, Eli Lilly, and Novo Nordisk. And because of limited competition, they set the prices and the prices go on increasing. And insulin right now leads to a very catastrophic expenditure, in fact, even impoverishing several households. Now, this can be further supported by my own personal examples from South India. We had conducted a study in Bangalore to evaluate insulin access, and we found that the public sector had only 67% availability of insulin. And patients, even in Bangalore, which were the headquarters of Biocon, a company whose insulin products are well recognized in many parts of the world, even there, we found that patients are largely dependent on insulin by non-Indian companies. Not just the patients, even physicians and pharmacists recommend insulin by non-Indian companies, despite domestically made human insulin being several times less expensive than the imported counterparts. And in fact, a lowest paid government worker would spend at least 1.4 to 9.3 days of his wages just for affording the monthly supply, either for his child with type 1 diabetes or for himself with poorly controlled type 2 diabetes. Another example is availability and affordability of essential medicines for cardiovascular disease and diabetes in Kerala, wherein we found that even with superior health indices in Kerala, the mean availability of essential medicines for both these diseases were 46% in government hospitals, slightly higher in government subsidized discount pharmacies such as Karunya, Niti, or central government's Jan Aushadhi, and much higher in private retail pharmacies, wherein the medicines are much more expensive. And even in Kerala's lowest paid government worker would spend, on average, 1.1 days' wages to afford monthly supply of a given medicine in the private sector. Now, Dr. Ramankuti sir has spoken about UHC already, and even the universal health coverage demands access to essential medicines. In fact, the goal 3.8 of Sustainable Development Goals mentions access to safe, effective, quality, and affordable
Any problem?
Gautam, can you hear us?
Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah, yeah.
I think I had a slight change in
No, no problem. It's okay. Fine. Continue, please.
Sorry for that. Now, the big question that remains unresolved is affordability for everyone. Now, there's a lack of data on medicines affordability. In fact, a 2015 report states that access to essential medicines at affordable prices remains highly problematic, with many households squeezed out of the market due to high prices and limited availability. And in fact, less than 20% of the 194 countries in the world had survey results generated between 2007 and 2013, and most of which were based only on cross-sectional survey data. Therefore, there's a substantial gap in information on true consumer prices of medicines as well as the availability of the same. Now, where does HTA come in place? The role of HTA in improving affordability largely is based on its ability to contribute to the evidence base for medicine selection and reimbursement decisions. Now, input and price, and also as well as the input and price negotiations over new essential medicines. Of course, it comes with preconditions, as mentioned earlier. The capacity to access clinical evidence has to be evaluated. It should consider local costs as well as ensure transparency and effective stakeholder engagement. Now, I'll go into a bit of evidence that explores HTA's role on availability and affordability. So, in summary, the evidence suggests that HTA can be used to manage medicines expenditure while maintaining availability. Very few high-income countries use HTA right now, and that includes Australia, Canada, UK, France, and Germany. One study even compared the effect of HTA in price negotiation versus using therapeutic reference pricing. As I mentioned earlier, HTA is mostly used for newer medicines, while therapeutic reference pricing is what one conventionally uses for the older medicines. And this study found out that HTA is not very different from therapeutic reference pricing. It did not clearly result in an impact on pricing, which means both the methods are comparable and can be used in a combination with each other. And HTA, therefore, is in theory a superior method for obtaining value for money. And however, you have to be combining both policies in order to get a more efficient approach. HTA with comparison with reference pricing would be a more efficient approach towards ensuring availability and affordability. Now, the limitations of HTA. First and foremost, HTA alone cannot make any essential medicines affordable. Decision makers must have the skills to interpret and apply HTA findings. And this doesn't get said enough, but it's very costly to conduct and requires strong technical capacity. Certain patient groups because of the fact that HTA can restrict marketing and access to costly new medicines in case they fail to generate sufficient data. So these are the recommendations for government and health systems in when it comes to HTA. They must create and maintain information systems for routine monitoring of data instead of relying solely on cross-sectional data, which only shows a snapshot of the situation. And they must implement a comprehensive set of policies to achieve affordable prices for essential medicines, develop national capacity to create benefits package that guide the procurement and reimbursement of affordable essential medicines. This is again more prominent in the European countries where medical medicine reimbursement is a major component of the health system. And India, with poor insurance coverage, the reimbursement is not very much looked into. And at the end, promoting transparency by sharing health and medicines information is also very important. And as you can see, even during COVID-19, India failed to generate transparent data across the country uh, when it comes to the pandemic. There are a few more recommendations by a recent Lancet Youth Commission on essential medicine policies when it comes to HTA, and they prioritize that HTAs, especially in low and middle income countries, can be conducted by improving the technology transfer between the developed and the developing world. And they suggest that the low income countries should follow the high income countries in conducting and adopting HTA in their health systems. And HTA should consider equity. When it comes to healthcare, equity is more important and more relevant than equality, because equality only ensures that everybody gets the same resources, while equity ensures that everybody gets the resources they want. And HTA should also consider equity and should go beyond cost effectiveness and affordability. And also, HTA should include stakeholders from all sectors: the government, academia, civil society, as well as the citizen. Now, coming to access to vaccine and price control, the major problem that the world still faces today is the poor coverage of immunization. And these are the 6 goals of the Global Vaccine Action Plan, and you can see there's a major gap in 5 of the 6 goals, except the last one. So immunization against DTP, you see that although they targeted 90%, 65 countries have failed to meet that goal, and about 18.7 million children still remain unvaccinated even for DTP. And when it comes to measles mortality reduction, the goal was that at least 4 of the 7 regions of the World Health Organization would eliminate measles, but only one region has eliminated measles so far. Rubella elimination was targeted from at least 2 of the WHO regions in 2015, and only one region was even close to eliminating rubella, and half of all children did not receive the rubella vaccine at all. 21 countries have not yet eliminated maternal and neonatal tetanus, despite targeting 59 countries. A world free of polio is still a dream, with 2 countries still remaining endemic to polio. And in fact, last year we saw major outbreaks happening in Philippines and Pakistan. And the only the last goal is on track, with 86 of the 90 countries still uh, uh, being successful to at least add a new or underutilized vaccine in their immunization programs. So this is the present vaccine access scenario. A delay in distributing vaccines and the disparity in vaccine distribution between the rich and poorer countries comes with a devastating human cost. And we should improve this by performing more local and regional clinical trials, and also enhancing the local vaccine production capacity. This is very crucial to improve the coverage for vaccination. This is a time lapse of immunization coverage with all the 3 doses of DTP across the world. And I think towards 2010, you will see that India was able to achieve 80 to 89% coverage. And while many of the low-income countries, especially in Africa, still remain less than 50%. So I would like to come to the conclusion of HTA in terms of access to medicines and vaccines. Published evidence suggests great potential for HTA to be adopted in LMICs, as HTA introduces value for money in health expenditure. And yet many LMICs have not adopted HTA process despite a strong need. And if before adopting in an LMIC, the capacity should be established early, and prerequisites and barriers should be addressed. And there is a great potential for generalizability, transferability, and even replicability of HTA results from developed countries to LMIC. And further, evidence confirms that HTA can be used to manage medicine expenditure growth, especially when combined with other tools, such as restricting reimbursement to medicines that's only in the national formulary and using with other policies such as international reference pricing, etc. Now, this is just for the other students who would like to take up HTA related activities in Kerala, if not India. We had done a similar research as a part of a thesis project, PharmD thesis project. We were able to get some very interesting results. So I would like to introduce you to a concept called WHO HAI methodology. It's a methodology designed by the World Health Organization, Health Action International, to collect reliable evidence on medicine prices, availability, affordability, and price components, with special focus on LMIs, low and middle income countries. Over 100 studies have been completed so far. Results are publicly available on the HII website. However, there is still limited data available from India, so there's enormous scope for research from India. And this is a paper that recently got published, wherein we evaluated the availability, prices, and affordability of essential medicines for cardiovascular disease and diabetes in Kerala. So I'll quickly tell you how straightforward and simple the approach is in order to conduct a similar study. So you start by selecting the main administrative area, preferably the capital, as the as a central survey area. So in our case, we would choose Trivandrum, and from Trivandrum, we choose 5 other districts which are travelable within one day, which can be reached within 1 day's travel. And therefore, you have a total of 6 districts, which would constitute a representative sample for this particular state. Now, in each district, you choose one public sector facility, which can be a major government hospital, or it can even be government subsidized discount pharmacies, as a survey anchor. And around each of these public sector facilities, you choose 5 private retail pharmacies. Thus, you have one public sector facility and 5 private retail pharmacies in each district, giving you a total sample of 6 public sector facilities and 30 private retail pharmacies. This would be a very representative sample for the state. And what you do in these facilities, you go with a predefined list of medicines, list of essential medicines, either for a particular disease or based on utilization or your choice. And then you ask the pharmacist or the pharmacy personnel for the availability as well as the prices of those medicines. What you do next is you compare it with the WHO standards. If 80% of the facilities in either the government, public sector or the private sector stock a particular medicine, then that medicine can be called available. And price target, as I mentioned before, we compare it with the Management Sciences for Health International Reference Price. And if the price of a particular medicine is more than 4 times the MSHIRP, then that violates the WHO price ratio. And finally, a drug is considered unaffordable if Kerala's lowest wage government worker has to spend more than 1 day's wage to afford the monthly supply of a particular medicine. Now, the MSHIRP also has the monthly supply and the World Health Organization's daily defined doses, etc. And it's available on the MSH website, and all the standards are also available there. So it's just a matter of comparison once you have the data. And the major challenge is only to ensure that all the districts are covered and all the facilities are covered to give you a representative sample. It's very much doable, and it always yields very good results, and thus you can also contribute to some of the HTA processes in the country. Thank you very much. If anyone's interested, you can always write to me. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Gautam, for that very good presentation. We are very proud of you, just having passed from here in a few months back. You have already become a resource person, and not just trivial. You have really done a good job. So I would like some people to ask questions, although it's quite unusual to have questions at this such online forums. Well, if there aren't anything else, I would like Dr. Biju to say something to sum up.
So I think health technology assessment is a reality now. More and more governments are setting up health technology units. And even in India, if you remember our latest national health policy, for the first time, they actually started saying that all the health conditions should be valued in terms of a DALI. So DALI and quality concepts even come in the health policy now. So, but these concepts, they migrate to the society in a very slow manner because of a lot of different technical issues, because a lot of people don't know the economic concepts. People don't know what is pharmacoeconomics. People don't know what is HTA. And even when many researchers don't know. So how can the common people can understand a lot of these things? So there is always a need in translating this knowledge both to the researchers, to the faculties, to the students, and that is from the technical side. And also there is a need to simplify these concepts so that the common man, general people also understand these concepts. So that when we talk about HTA, one of the important part of that HTA become the participation from the people, participation from the end user. So participation from the end user can only be achieved provided they can understand these concepts, etc. So we still have a long way to go to achieve, but surely we are going in the right track, slowly, but in the right track itself. So once again, thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity to present.
We will be very happy, in fact, to have more such programs. I would like to say one thing. See, there is so little emphasis on these issues such as health HTA. I would confess that 1 year ago, I had no idea about, a little more than 1 year ago, I had very little idea about HTA was. So in a way, I would say, I'm not, you can hear, right? Anyway, so my point is that this needs to be carried across to the pharmacy schools in India, the medical schools, I think probably also need to be introduced to these concepts. So I would propose, Dr. Biju, we should come together and probably offer some kind of a, online course or something. Or after the pandemic is over, we should consider a full-time, not a full, at least a 2-day workshop or something in which we can co-host it with your participation. Of course, we are not independently capable of doing it ourselves, but we certainly are trying to move in that direction. And we are very grateful to you, all the participants. I expected more. I'm surprised that we didn't have as many as I had imagined, but many are, I think, on the live streaming on YouTube, I think, because we could not accommodate all of them. But we could have accommodated a lot more if we knew that the attendance would be so easy. Anyway, thank you very much, Dr. Biju, Dr. Gautam, Dr. Fatima, Dr. Akash, Dr. Shamnaz. Is Dr. Shamnaz here? Does he want to conclude, or if he is not available? Is there? Okay. So I would invite Dr. Shamnaz to conclude the program with a formal bye. And I am very happy that everybody has been benefited immensely from the very, very interesting lectures from people like Dr. Biju and Dr. Ramgutti. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all. A warm good evening to our most valued Honorable Chief Guest, Principal, invited dignitaries, management, dear colleagues, and every other gathered here. It is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of those who worked really hard to make this webinar happen. First of all, I extend my most sincere thanks to the Almighty God for making today's event a resounding success. With His blessings and grace, we made this event a great success. On behalf of ISPO Student Chapter National College of Pharmacy, I extend a really hearty thanks to our chief guest, Dr. Ramaguti, Dr. Biju George, who spared time from their busiest schedule to grace the occasion. Today, we had an opportunity to learn from thoughts, and this will surely be going to encourage us in our future events. Your thoughts have enlightened our minds and have shown us a new path. My sincere gratitude to our beloved principal, Dr. M.K. Unikrishnan, and my dear student, Dr. Gautam Satish, for gracing the occasion and sharing their thoughts today. I am immensely thankful to Dr. Akash Maratagam for his technical support and Ms. Fatima Mujib towards anchoring of today's function. I also extend thanks to all the staff members for their enormous cooperation within the organization of this gala event. A special mention to our most respected principal, Dr. M.K. Unikrishnan, for being a catalyst that stimulated us to do our best and standing as pillars of strength. With a deep sense of appreciation, we thank our loving teachers for their untiring efforts. I would like to thank the people who worked behind the scene to make this event happen, especially our ISPO team. Last but not least, a big thank you to each one of you who made this webinar a memorable one. On behalf of National College of Pharmacy, let me thank all teaching, non-teaching staffs and students once again. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
And without forgetting, let me remind everybody that the feedback form is with you. Please send it back to us filled. Okay, that's very important for us to report our program to the Discord,
Yes.
which we have to. Dr. Biju, thanks once again. Gautam, thanks. Okay, I suppose we can leave now.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you then. Bye. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks.